In basic military training, what was your most vivid memory of that time?
Wow, that was a long time ago. Um, it's interesting because I went back years later. My nephew went through the same base, and it actually looked exactly the same, which was so crazy. But I think my most vivid thing was all the yelling, and then not realizing until much later. And I'm not talking about during basic. I'm talking about much later in my career, the purpose of all of that, which was not to demean us or anything like that. It was to break us down so that we could become built back up into a team. And I think it took me a long time to figure out that a significant emotional event is a great learning tool and sometimes necessary. So I think in remembering, things from that time. I mean, I remember the obstacle course, and I remember going to chow, and I remember all those things, and having smoke breaks at the back of the formation, different things like that. But at the time, I didn't realize the yelling had a purpose. But I think the significant thing for me was the realization that it actually served something that, building a team out of a group of individuals through a significant emotional event. And so I think that was the lesson I guess I could take away from basic. I only did 6 weeks of basic, and then I was at Keesler, Mississippi for 3 months learning basic electronics, so tech school. And then I went to Wichita Falls to learn a specific computer system. It's called Autobahn. It was a switching system for phone. It was a phone switching systems. And so I spent almost the first 10 and a half months, almost 12 months actually, in school learning things 8 hours a day at the college level. So for the guy who didn't want to go to college, and so he joined the military, I spent 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, going to college for a year. So I basically did 2 years worth of college in a year when I didn't want to go to college. So that was my first, I won't say that's my first duty assignment. After that, I went to McClellan Air Force Base in California, Sacramento, California, to work on a test bed for that computer switching system. We developed all the modifications for phones, the military phone systems around the world. So we had a system down in the basement of a building. Imagine one whole floor being a computer that switched, I want to say 500 phones. That was all it did, one whole floor. But it had the ability to do decryption and classified phone calls and different things like that. So it was a pretty intense phone system for its day.
Can you talk about your promotions during that time? I know you went in without the two stripes,
Right.
right? But then you re-enlisted.
Right.
So talk us through that.
Okay. So as far as promotions goes, I went from Airman Basic. So the steps from Airman Basic all the way up through, let's see, Buck Sergeant, they're automatic. They happen on a time basis. And so I think from Airman Basic to Airman, which is one stripe, was 6 months. So I got that while I was in tech school. Then to Airman First Class, which is the second stripe, I think it's a year and a half or something like that. And then the next step at that point was Senior Airman, 3 stripes. And I got that, they call it below the zone. You meet a board and you answer a bunch of questions in front of a board of people, and then I got selected to get Senior Airman below the zone. And then all the ranks after that, you take 2 tests. You take a professional test, so testing on computer systems for me, and then you take a test on professional military customs and courtesies and that type of thing. Uniform and all the different things about the military. And then they score that along with your physical, your PT test and your performance reviews and different things like that. Anyway, so Staff Sergeant took me a while because I was not really focused on that and I was going to get out of the military. When I re-enlisted, I took it more seriously and got it pretty quickly after that. When I was in Germany, I went from, they called it Buck Sergeant, which was 3 stripes and a colored star in the middle. They don't have that rank anymore. And I tested for Staff Sergeant the first time after re-enlisting and got it. And then Tech Sergeant took a little while longer. I got that right as I was left Berlin, so that's 4 years later. So I started out as a buck sergeant, and I ended up as a tech sergeant.
These are leadership roles at this point, right?
Yeah, so I went from being a technician working on the equipment to running the shop, running the maintenance shop, the computer maintenance shop it's called a skiff. It's a special compartmented information facility. It's, classified stuff goes on in there. And so I ran all the computers and repaired all the computers, installed them, did all that at that site.
And then from Berlin, because you made it to Master Sergeant, where were you promoted, and what was your station at that rank?
So I went to Goodfellow Air Force Base in San Angelo, and I started out there. Started out as a technician there, like working on computer equipment there, and also training people to go work on the equipment that I had worked on out in the field. So I was an instructor, and then very quickly became a work center supervisor and a administrator, basically. And I also fairly early on became a first sergeant there. First temporary, so I didn't have a diamond. I just was filling in for people who were doing that job. And then eventually I went to first sergeant school in Alabama and got my diamond.